Ching, 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 ching. Greetings, explorers. I hope the winter is treating you well and you're playing lots of games. Today, we're going to look at the last part of our top 1500, which is appropriately named the top. Now, these are games that are a mix of the good, the bias, and the random. So let's just dive right in with the excellence in story games, number 9. First of all, we have Namiji, rounding upwards from an 8.5 rating for myself. This is just a very Zen like experience of a game, and I kind of like those. I like where the pressure is not on all the time, and you're just sailing around, catching fish, having events, very much in the sense of Tokaido, only now on a boat. The production is gorgeous, it's very serene. Overall, a really good story experience. On the opposite side of the scales, we have Gizmos, a fun little marble placement game, which just is vibrant, has lots of colors. You can play it with your family. There may not be much of a theme here. You're presumably in a factory pumping out parts, I guess. I have never played this game, but it looks very fun, to be honest. Cascadia also clocks in at 8.5, and Cascadia was the storm of the year in terms of popularity. I just like the nature theme of it. I like the placement of tiles with animals on them. Overall, it's a very good character and location interaction. Also, here, there may not be lots of story or theme to go around, but it sure is really pretty to look at. These nature games typically are. Another game that is really nice to look at is Quad Heroes. Very vibrant, very colorful, but also very fantasy like. You're playing these cube creatures and kind of like Robo Rally, you're racing around the board, knocking into each other, sending missiles at each other, or bumping each other into water or traps. And the experience is just one of pure fun and delight, with a little bit of programming as well. And the cubes are so fun to paint up. The very embodiment of a story game would be The Princess Bride, literally called an adventure book game. Now, this is a very, very simple game that you can play with kids, and it follows the plot of the movie almost to a T. It's really engaging, it's really vibrant. Overall, just a very wholesome and a holistic experience if you're not looking for a challenge, because this game is really easy to play and beat. Next up is Kingdom Rush, also an 8.5. Just look at this picture. It just screams vibrance and colors, and it's based on the video game. So yeah, it's an interesting mix of trying to translate a video game into a board game, which does not always succeed. In this case, it actually really does. And it's a fun challenge, but there's also a lot of emergent stories that can come up when you're playing, trying to defend your tower. Now, there are a lot of sci fi games out there where the board just looks boring. It's just this abstract spatial relationship game where there's a few planets and you're flying around with ships and you're doing economics. Ryan Lockett actually pulls it off to make it look really enticing and attractive with the colorful planets and the little miniature ships. This would be one that I actually would be interested in playing. The atmosphere is very strong in this one, a very good vibe, I think. Another game that is very much in line with what I like about sci fi is Asking for Troubles. This would insert a lot of humor, a lot of pop culture references into it, and it's so incredibly orange. But yeah, for a technically Euro game, this is not a dull medieval trading on the Mediterranean type of game. This is fun in space, and everything from components to the artwork screams it. Then we have Cyclades. Cyclades, I just love the theme of it. The Greek mythology is very strong in this one. The miniatures are nice. It's vibrant already when you don't even paint up the miniatures. But if you do, I bet it looks even more gorgeous. It is maybe a dudes on a map type of game, which is not my forte, but I can see myself playing this and coming up with some really good emergent stories. Next up is Parks. More in the line with Cascadia, Parks is a very nature inspired, trailblazing kind of a game. Very Zen like, almost like Namiji and Tokaido. This is just pleasurable art to look at as you are walking sequentially through these parks. The story is not very exciting, maybe, but it's very fulfilling. There's a lot to do about Fantasy Flight Games' Terranoth world, their fantasy realm, and certainly about Runebound, depending on which version or edition you are a fan of. This is a moving around a landscape kind of a game. There are a lot of emergent stories galore. There's also pre written narrative, there's some scenarios, all around just a very solid fantasy game, if not a little bit old fashioned. In the simpler realm of games, the Quest Kids is an introduction for families to try out a dungeon crawl. I just like the vibrancy and the colors of this game. It's not a very complex game, but sometimes that's what you want when you play long campaign games all the time. This just hits the dungeon crawl genre very succinctly, and yeah, it's just overall a very nice experience. Next up, mechs in a Eastern European landscape. This game may not look very colorful. It is purposefully so. The atmosphere is very rich with this one. I love the sort of Tales of the Loop kind of, sci-fi mechanics in a very wholesome environment. It's a very strategic kind of a game, but with the Rise of Fenris, there's also a nice narrative campaign to it. In the realm of post-apocalyptic games, Fallout Shelter is maybe exactly the opposite again. A very simple card game and placement of enemies within, where you're just trying to make the best of a nuclear winter, I guess. This one just makes me laugh. There's a good sense of humor in it, as is appropriate to the Fallout IP. And yeah, I really dig this game and what it's trying to do. Next up is Detective Club. Detective Club is a one of those games like Mysterium or Dixit where you're trying to associate words with images and find out clues. I think this is one of the better implementations of these kind of games because there's an actual sort of a social deduction going on. And yeah, it just once again the artwork is just astounding. And in my book, art is theme as well, not just the narrative word. Oh, praise be. Even more post-apocalyptic themes. Last Aurora is actually really cool. I like what they did with the sort of carte tableau building that you have vehicles that you're sort of gearing up and you're racing across this icy landscape to get to the last boat leaving the continent. Yeah, this is just, it seems fun. I'm smiling as I'm thinking of this game, thinking I just want to play it again. Going back in time to the Wild West, Coloma. I like the Wild West theme. As a European, I think we are have a tendency of just liking the Wild West better than Americans themselves. But yeah, this is a very by the book Euro game, yet the theme really appeals to me, and I think a lot of stories can pop up around the playing table of just what you're trying to do and how it's often just kind of fails because someone is thwarting you. Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective, is a very odd kind of a game in that there's not really a playing board. You're solving mysteries, following in the footsteps of Sherlock Holmes. This is very much a deduction game where you get a bunch of clues, you get a story, a scenario. I think it comes with 10 scenarios, I want to say. And there's a whole series of these boxes where you just try to solve a murder or solve a crime and try to beat Sherlock Holmes at his own game. Ikeon. No, I'm not going to IKEA. We're going to a bizarre future where the world has fallen apart. And this is a very evocative game. I have not tried it yet, but it just looks very juicy. It's a very much a Euro game put in a really cool coating of artwork and abstract concepts. It might be hard to wrap your head around, but I bet there's like great lore attached to this game. Munchkin. Dungeon. Munchkin, love it or hate it. I have to say, this is probably the best implementation of it. It has a location. You're going through a dungeon. It has characters in the form of minis. This, for me, is a huge improvement over the card game because it just has that verticality of characters. It has the locations, it has the events. Yeah, I can see myself actually loving this Munchkin interpretation. Then we have Tang Garden. Tang Garden, another one of these Zen games where literally you're just building a garden and you're inviting people to come in and gaze out over the vistas in the distance. Everything about this screams location, location, location. It's a game that just doesn't have mechanics about story, but the beautiful vistas that you're creating and the characters that you have walking around make this game for me a very good emergent story game. Like Gizmos, Potion Explosion uses marbles. In this case, you are concocting potions, and that's it. I do love the art of this. I think that the art is really really funny, but it's a really simple game. Um, Beautifully produced. Um, but yeah, you're making potions. What else is there to say? I like it. Also on the light side of gameplay spectrum is Wonder Book. Now, if you thought Everdell had an obnoxious tree, just look up Wonder Book. No, in all honesty, I love the simplicity of this game. You're basically just having adventures with your little characters around this magical tree. It's extremely simple. There are some broken elements to it, but boy, does it have a table presence, and that counts for a lot too in my clocking in very appropriately at 100 is Anachrony. Boy, this game is famous for its heavy mechanics, yet being very thematic. You're traveling throughout time to get resources from the future that eventually you're going to have to pay back. This game is a big fan favorite in the community. I have not tried it yet. The mechanics do scare me about this game, but hey, time travel, what is not to love about that? Hadrian's Wall may be just as complex, only much smaller footprints. This roll and write has people in a tizzy. I personally don't care for the theme so much. Yeah, I would like to try this, but the sort of the mathy complexity of this game scares me. I like crossing off boxes like any other person, but ultimately the table footprint might be too low for me on this one. Simon's Arcadia Quest. Well, boy, oh boy. This is just a beer and pretzel fun romp in a dungeon kind of a game. Chibi minis, great art. It just screams emergent stories as things fall apart or they go your way. This is, yeah, just a really fun looking game. I like the characterizations in it. I like the locations in it. I like the little events and scenarios that you can do. Yeah, this is a winner. Boy, are we swinging the pendulum in this list from happy-go-lucky fantasy warriors to just a very dour and sobering experience. This War of Mine is narrative Awaken Realms at its extreme. Very, very serious topic. It leaves people sad and shocked when they play it, but it's maybe because of that a very unique experience, which definitely deserves an 8.8 rating in my list. And we're back in Happy Land again with Everdell. And look, there is that tree. Everdell has become this monster of a game, but such a cute monster. All these cute little squishy fruits and fuzzy little animal meeples and beautiful, gorgeous art. This is just dripping with theme. And it's essentially just a card game, a card engine building game. So I should not like it, but I really do, actually. Cartographers may be the only real roll and write that I enjoy playing. I love the art, first of all, from the role player universe, but I also like the idea of just mapping out a land. I love drawing maps, and this is such a simple, easy to get to game that you can bring with you when you're traveling, and you can map out fun little fancy landscapes. Yeah, this is all around a thematic winner. Pirates, pirates, pirates. Boy, do I love my pirates. And it's in the Caribbean. It has gorgeous miniatures that sort of transformer like, sort of assemble themselves and they morph into something more dangerous. Regretfully, the app was such a failure on this when it first launched. It has ruined a lot of people's experience of it. They have just brought out a new expansion, so hopefully things are improving. But boy, is this a one gorgeous game. The artwork, the minis. Oh, I believe the precursor to Ikeon is Mysthia, and you can combine the two actually with each other, which I think is really awesome when games do that. Likewise, in the same universe, in the same theme and style of art, this is just one gorgeous production. I'm not sure if I would know how to intuitively approach this game, but I certainly want to try it. And especially with the solo modes that just kickstarted, this might be a winner. This Aventuria card game brings me back to my very first role playing game experiences in the 80s, where we in Europe had our own Dungeons and Dragons version called the Dark Eye or the Schwarze Auge, or in Dutch, Het Oog des Meesters. And so this is maybe just like an Arkham Horror LCG card game, but set in that world. And it's not as good as that game, but it's still just one nostalgic pleasure for myself. I have a big fondness for everything Celtic and Scottish, and so Glenmore 2 Chronicles is just, yeah, a very crunchy, non-story tiles type of game that I want to play. The theme is just what does it for me. And of course, there's expansions to it. There's a solo mode to it. I just want to see those little Scottish meeples making their way across a cardboard landscape, and I know brew whiskey. Almost a spiritual successor to Quest Kids would be Adventure Tactics Domien's Tower. This is a game where you're basically battling bosses and you're leveling up. And the leveling up of the characters is supposedly so great, it deserves to be on spot 90 in my list. Even though I've never tried it, this is definitely one that I want to try at some point just to see if maybe not the locations, maybe not the events, maybe not the story, but the characters really do it for me. A game where it's definitely not about the characters or even the locations, but all about the events is The King's Dilemma. Now, I've actually tried to solo this, which you might think is not possible. I might do a story tiles on how to solo games that are not soloable. But this legacy game of discovering the events of a kingdom is so evocative, so engrossing that it was just too much fun not to just try and get through and play by myself. Micro Macro Crime City, the first of so far three of the Micro Macro Where's Waldo ish crime solving games. Boy, is this a lot of fun. I've been just doing this every morning almost when my kid goes to school, just doing a quick 10-minute crime solving session. This is just so much pure fun. The stories, the humor, the artwork. It may not look like much, but it packs a punch, literally. Talking about packing a punch, but in a very bloody manner. The Order of Vampire Hunters is kind of an old school dungeon crawl where there's not much of a campaign to go through, so to speak. There's not a lot of innovative mechanics, but it's just dripping with that atmosphere that the vampires really speak to me. And this easy-go-lucky beer and pretzel slay some vampires and not turn into a vampire kind of a game. Yeah, it really speaks to me. Now, I'm not sure if the Exit games would rank this high in future lists. I do enjoy escape games, but this is probably one of the lesser escape games for me, just because the mechanics turn out to be fairly the same. Even though the variety of themes in the boxes is different. There's going to be a better escape room game, card game, coming up later on our list. From an escape room-ish kind of a game where you literally destroy components and toss it out, comes a game where you do not, and you can happily pass it on, which I did after probably an hour of playing this. Adventure Island is Robinson Crusoe in a small format. I love the sort of castaway on an island theme of it. The puzzles that you have to solve are not overly complex. The survival element is not very strong, but yeah, it's a fun game. The Great Race was a big surprise for me in 2020 and 2021 with the Great Race 2. I love the 80 days around the world kind of vibe that it has. The atmosphere is rich. There's narrative elements everywhere. You even get a newspaper from that time of day. It's not a very fast racing game. It's a kind of a slow burn, but it's so rich in atmosphere and you have teams from all over the world competing to each other over various continents. Oh, I could just keep on gushing about this one. Flying Frog Productions has very cheesy but very fun and almost effortless fun kind of games. A touch of evil is their sort of gothic, Sleeping Hollow kind of vibe. It's just a game full of random events, things happening to you. It could go horribly wrong, and you laugh with your friends about it. Nothing very serious or strategic, but just a very big fun romp in the dark. So let's bring some light to the dark. Literally, in Sheol, you are light bearers who are dungeon crawling kind of your way into the dark landscape full of nasties. This was such a surprise this last year. Such a good game. It labels itself as a tower defense game, but there's dungeon crawling elements in it. There's sci-fi horror. There's uh, settlement building. Oh man, this game, I gotta get this back to the table because it is a lot of fun. Talking about fun, well, Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast is not in a fun place right now, but their timeless brand of Dungeons and Dragons has found its way to board games, and this is not a complex or anything new under the sun type of a dungeon crawl, but it's fun, and they've got various stories, of which the Legend of Drist I've taken as an example. Yeah, it belongs on the list as well. An incredibly world building feat is Tidal Blades. And part two will come as a dungeon crawler, a much more innovative dungeon crawler than the Dungeons and Dragons. But part one, a worker placement dice building game, deserves a spot on this list as well because the world is so full of lore, the characters are rich, the locations are vibrant, the events are evocative. This is one franchise that is going to make it far in my book. Adding rum and swashbuckling to the mix is Rum and Bones Second Tide. This is essentially just one big skirmish game where you're fighting between two ships. From Simon, so maybe that says enough. Good meanies, fun pirate theme, but ultimately maybe a little hollow. I don't know. It still deserves a spot on this list because of that theme. I just love pirates too much to not include this one on the list. And speaking about themes, here we go back to the Wild West again. This time you are on a train and your meeples are firing at each other. This may not look like much, and honestly, I thought there was some 3D train involved, so I may have mistaken this with another game when I looked at it. Mind you, all these titles were vetted through Pub Meeple, so there may be some odd ones in between. This might be one of them, to be honest. Certainly not an odd one is the similarly themed Western Legends. Here you are sandboxing your way through the sandy waste as a cowboy or maybe a saloon girl or who knows, a gold digger. I have not tried this game yet, but I'm really eager to. I want to see where these emergent stories bring me. And the production is so great, you can't help but being transported back into the Wild West and go off on an adventure. Be good, be bad. Something really bad is Kingdom Death Monster. Oh boy, this is also deserving of a episode in itself. Very bleak, very dark, very stylistic, very beautiful in its own way. This is definitely a game that has events, characters, and locations just itching, waiting to be examined in a design session or a master class. So, yeah, I'll talk more about this, but it's deserving a spot on this list. Unmatched is a skirmish game, a two-player skirmish game where you are fighting mythological or popular fantasy, sci-fi, IP related characters against each other. This series has tons and tons of characters, and they all are very unique in what they can do and how they battle each other. The miniatures are nice, the locations are a little abstract, but yeah, this is overall a very nice, short two-person game. Let's go exploring in the real world this time. Like Seventh Continent, this is a card laying game, an exploration game, where you are reading passages of text and story, and you try to make your way through this small deck. And there are three. There's Lhasa. There are two others, which I can't really remember right now, but they're just fun little experiences if you don't want to unpack a big game like Seventh Continent. Based on the video game, Bloodborne is a scenario driven, but not campaign necessarily, battle game where you have to fight horrific monsters. Very popular. It's not typically my style. I don't like games that are just all about the combat and the challenge, but I cannot deny its beauty and I cannot deny its popularity. This is maybe something that I should try actually. In line with Kingdom Death Monster comes Aeon Trespass Odyssey. In my opinion, the better game simply because of the theme that is much more approachable for me. Greek mythology with a heavy dose of sci fi in it. This game has it all. It has exploration, Seventh Continent style. It has boss battling like KDM. It has character growth through your Argonauts and your Titans that they operate. Yeah, this game is very evocative, also worthy of its own episode. Swinging back on the elegance of a game, whereas Aeon Trespass is really hard to grok and understand at first, Forest of Radgost is simplicity itself. It's maybe not even a game, according to its own creators. It's an experience, which I really, really dig. You are wandering through a forest, aimlessly getting lost, but trying to find two kids who got lost and bring them home. It's as simple as that. And on the way, oh yeah, there's mythological Slavic creatures. Ranking higher than Quad Heroes is the original Robo Rally. Boy, this brings me back to my university years. It may not be much to look at, but boy, is this game just fun. And it comes with so much variety, so many upgrades that you can build on top of your robots to move faster, to shoot further, to just be more effective. This is mayhem at its best. And yeah, this definitely deserves to be the 70th spot. A game that I've yet to play but have heard a lot about is Tales of the Arabian Nights. Extremely random, anything can happen and everything will happen, but the characters wandering around the Middle East having all sorts of weird and wacky adventures with no real guidelines is just right up my alley. It's too good to pass up, and yeah, I really got to get this to the table, but boy, the theme, this just makes it all worthwhile. Within the Clank universe, there is a legacy game that I tried out, and it had the Acquisitions Incorporated theme on it. Although it didn't come through that strongly, I have watched all the Acquisitions Inc. Podcasts and playthroughs. This is still a fun implementation of Clank, where you're just opening envelopes and changing the board as you go along. Yeah, it's very much fun and probably one of the better legacy games out there. D6 Dungeons, Dudes, Dames, Danger, Dice, and Dragons. Oh man, this is also worthy of a design episode discussion. This is a game that is essentially just a take that kind of a thwart your opponent kind of a game. But man, this is probably the most overproduced game ever. The table presence is enormous. The theme, harkening back to Dungeons and Dragons, is awesome. The chibi miniatures, the art. Oh, yeah, I gotta talk more about this. If you haven't noticed yet, dungeon crawlers rank high in story tiles lists simply because of that character event, location, symbiosis, how tiles can interact with characters and they interact with events, and everything just melds together like a delicious story, emergent story, or thematic story. This is no different, although I have never played it. It just looks really interesting. Fantasy creatures duking it out. Another game that I've yet to try is Xia, Legends of a Drift System. Very popular in the community. Again, I'm not fond of the sci fi theme, but I think that there's a lot to be said about sandboxing in space and going off on your own adventures. It will be interesting to see Iridia, the follow up, but in a fancy landscape, come out later this year. But yeah, Xia is definitely something to keep your eye out if you like sci fi. Townsfolk Tussle is a very cartoony, Looney Tunes or old-fashioned toony version of KDM or Ain Trespass. You're fighting these wacky monsters. There's so much humor and so much delicious art in here. Interactive terrain that you're fighting on, upgrades of characters, things that can happen. I just wish that there was more story to it or like even a long campaign than just 3 episodes. But otherwise, yeah, it's a solid pick. Awaken Realms' original Dudes on a Map, Lords of Hellas, combines Greek mythology with sci fi in a big battle royale. They came out with Lords of Ragnarok later. This is not the type of game that I like because it focuses so much on combat, but I cannot deny Awaken Realms' panache for excellence in miniatures, in art, and all around theme. Yeah, this is definitely a winner. From Gods to Mice. Boy, is this a cute plaid hat game. The one of the most prolific dungeon crawlers around, but also a really good popular game with mice and magic and fantasy, wandering around, having adventures. The stories are great. There's a long, long campaign. There's a follow-up campaign. The books are thick for this one, and it's just all around fun to just be wandering around these dungeons as little mice. Ryan Lockhart is the Leonardo da Vinci of our times in board gaming. Together with his wife and crew at Red Raven Games, they make lavish, beautiful productions of theme and mechanics. They have adventurous feels. They have evocative characters that you can build stories around. They explore wild realms. As you'll see later on this list, this is not the highest ranking one, but it is the original almost in my book. You'll see a lot of Plaid Hat games on this list. Stuffed Fables is also one of the originals, clocking in at position 60. It is about these cutesy little teddy bears who are wandering around trying to protect their little girl owner and having these adventures against nightmares. The map book, spearheaded by Plaid Hat, is revolutionary for story games, and this is one experience that definitely everyone should try. Orange Nebula's venture into space. Their second game is a puzzler where you are landing on planets, conveniently packed into these planet box, jacked into a system that is called Unsettled, with funny dialogue, with adventurous little tidbits of exploration, but mainly just a puzzly challenge each and every time over again. Very mechanically driven, but also some solid theme. Ryan Lockett is on a roll right now. Islebound scores higher than Above and Below. Maybe not in the future, but I do like the watery theme of this. This one has no story whatsoever, but it's very evocative. Again, it definitely fits in that RZM world of his, and yeah, the naval theme of it makes me want to buy it because I don't even own it yet. Another game I need to get is Lost Ruins of Arnak. Again, a very popular game in the community. You are a explorer, getting relics in this landscape. It's very Euro driven. The board looks really busy, but boy, does it look gorgeous! It looks very colorful, and the popularity is just gaining steam, and they're coming out with more expansions. So I might have to succumb to the wild jungles of Arnak. That's actually Lost Ruins, not jungles. Clocking in at a 9.3 is Ayla and Something Shiny, a very unassuming adventure of a little bunny that goes through questing in his backyard almost. The mechanics are kind of interesting. You're shuffling cards back into a deck to generate events. You have to make sure that you don't run out of health, that you gain the quests goals that you can. But yeah, it's a very interesting game. I like it. Eldritch Horror is one that I actually just got. Boy, 10 years after it came out. This was long in the running. From the stable of Arkham Files of Fantasy Flight Games, this is Cthulhu Lovecraftian mythos all through mixed up with Indiana Jones exploring. So I cannot wait to dig into this one. Characters, events, locations, the three staples of story tiles are going to be abundant in this one. I might actually have to do a playthrough. Who knows? Merchant's Cove was my foray into very thematic Euro games, and this one came with a twist. It came with asymmetric player powers. Like you could be a smith crafting items, you could be a time traveling scientist getting relics from a past, a pirate fishing for fish. All these variable thematic player roles that you could assume with their own mechanics. It was just so much fun. Harkening back to fun from the 80s is the Goonies IP. And this Coded Chronicles game, where you are matching up numbers to generate events and outcomes and read them in narrative booklets, is something that I found very, very pleasurable and very nostalgic. And I had the soundtrack running in the background as I tried to solve the puzzles. It follows the plot of the story very narrowly, like The Princess Bride, yet it's just effortless fun. Then we get to the others. This was an experiment for me because I don't necessarily like the body horror, but I liked the idea of the seven deadly sins. And this was a Simon game that Z Garcia from the Dice Tower really liked and recommended. So I thought I'd give it a try. I'm not sure if this would rank anywhere near as high as it does right now because I'm kind of disenchanted with it, but yeah, there it is. Talking about disenchantment, when Time Stories first came out, this blew everyone's mind. It was like this time traveling narrative story, tableau building card system that had so many different packs of different time periods that you could go to. Ultimately, it fell flat through the mechanics. So, this is worthy of a further examination. But yeah, the production values were awesome. The art was great and the themes were varied. Boy, we're at number 50 already, 9.3 on the rating. The Initiative from Unexpected Games, Corey Konieczka. I love this designer. He has made some of the greatest games alive, and he keeps on innovating. This was another one of his experiments that turned out so well. A comic book with a double layered kind of thematic narrative on top of investigations, puzzles. Boy, this was just a winner. Everyone should definitely try this one out. Switching to the 9.4 is the heavily overproduced and underpriced Mechs and versus Minions. I'm not sure if you can get this game anymore, but this blew my mind. The production values are so over the top, unbelievable. From Riot Games, this game is Robo Rally to the max. It has 12 scenarios. It's a legacy game. You will definitely enjoy this if you love tight little races and fun little chibis. I have yet to play Arkham Horror, just like Eldritch Horror. Yet this one ranks higher because it is the original game that explored the Lovecraftian mythos. You have these location tiles, you have these pathways in between, all these events, all these scenarios, all these goals, all these characters. These games are just Lovecraftian horror to the max, and they do them really, really well. A better game than Star Wars X-Wing Miniatures or Xia Legends of a Drift System is Stars of Icarius, in my opinion. The first game of Games. And yeah, it plays with a little bit of exploration in space and on planets, but the core really shines with the ship battle, the dogfights in space. They are just very fun, very accessible, very intuitive, and there are so many of these missions in the book. Did we mention Corey Knizka? Well, at one point he may discover lands unknown. I love this game. I think it is totally misunderstood. I think it hits the theme really, really well in what it tries to achieve with the components and the gameplay. However, the unique game system that FFG stuck onto it caused it to fail. And now you can pick it up for maybe between 12 and $20 on Amazon. Go try it out. You will not know what you're missing otherwise. So, Orange Nebula's first game, Vindication, is one that has a special place in my heart, and I will be talking about it more as I have designed materials for them. This game is a mechanical sandbox victory point collection game disguised as a theme game. Now, that's going to raise some eyebrows, but it is a really good and fun game. We'll talk about this more at some point in the future. I do not own a lot of CMON games, but the World of Smog Rise of Moloch, based on Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, is a evocative Victorian steampunk pleasure to behold. The minis are among the best that CMON has ever produced, and the artwork is sublime. These are all scenarios. There's a lot of content for it. I'm going to play it soon, and I can't wait. Dungeon Fighter is a dexterity game, many of which have actually appeared on this list or will appear. I like the art. I like the humor of this game. I like that they brought out various thematic versions of the game that you can combine all together. This is dexterity gaming at its best because you're dungeon crawling using dexterity. So it's a little bit of both worlds. I'll see how this goes in real life, but I have several boxes and I can't wait to try them out. Legacy of Dragonholt was Nikki Valence's attempt to capturing a role-playing game in a board game box, and she did pretty well, I have to say. This game is packs a narrative punch, a lot of scenario books, which I like. It has a map or two, it has character sheets. You are essentially reading like Sherlock Holmes consulting detective, but you are reading in the world of Terranoth, fantasy, adventures galore. Yeah, definitely recommend. On the top of his game, but hugely underrepresented and a hidden gem in the community, is the Explore It series. There are 4 volumes so far out of 6, with Click's Madness a must, a campaign book that guides you through this sandbox fantasy system. I will be talking about this a lot more as well because I think it's one of the strongest role playing games captured in a board game ever. Do yourself a favor, check it out. Phew, I need to take a breather. Those were quite a few games. Now we get to simply the best in terms of story games, story driven games, or thematic games, in my opinion at least. It's very subjective, of course, but and everyone can happily disagree. But these are the games that, in my opinion, are the pinnacle of narrative driven story games. Let's get through them and see which ones rank the highest. Ooh. On number 40, we find the number one game of 2022, Trudvang Legends, the other Simon game that I own. And this one is one narrative adventure up the wazoo, effortless fun in the Trudvang world. I combine it with the role playing game from Riot Minds, but the miniatures make it, the landscape makes it, the easy, accessible gameplay makes it. This is a winner for sure. And if you didn't agree with the previous one, Seafall is definitely one that's going to be contentious. I played this one solo despite needing 3 players, but it's a legacy game, and I so wanted to explore this naval exploration game. And boy, was I surprised how fun this one. This to me is Rob Davio's best work. Although there are some more Rob Davio games on the way later on the list. Diving back into the realms of Lovecraftian horror, mixed with a little steampunk, is Machina Arcana. This perfectionist game design has been iterated 3 times now, but boy, does it pack a wallop of a punch. There's some great narrative and some art. The theme is on par, it's very atmospheric, it's very challenging, it's very claustrophobic. If you want to play Mountains of Madness, then this is your game. Wilson. Robinson Crusoe is a well, it's Robinson Crusoe. This is probably one of the more thematic, challenging games on my list. And with Mystery Tales, it expands into Lovecraft again. But this is one of the best productions in terms of thematic components that you'll ever see. And it has this huge underrated event card deck system that I'll talk about later as well. Back to the dexterity games. Catacombs is a flicking dungeon crawler where you have tons of discs representing characters and monsters and missiles and spells that you flick at each other in order to progress through these dungeon maps. Nowadays, there's a new version with neoprene maps. There's a lot of expansions to it. This is dungeon crawling at its lightest, at its best, and most dexterous, I would say. Social deduction and playing detective was never better than with Chronicles of Crime. With the Millennium series and the upcoming Dark Quarter game, these games keep on improving. The use of an app where you search and scan around a room in a VR environment is completely on par with the theme of the game. The game is evocative, it has great implementation across the board, a great variety. This is a winner. Nostalgia alert. Okay, Choose Your Own Adventures score high in my opinion, and House of Danger is no exception. This may not seem like very much, but you can pack this game into your bag when you go out hiking or you take a flight somewhere. You play it out on your plane tray table. This is just a choose your own adventure, but in card form. But it is so unassuming and so much fun. And yes, you will die when you draw this card. The Return of Davio. With help of Rob Davio, Matt Leacock brought out his Pandemic to the Legacy world with season 1, 2, and 0. And Legacy season 1 is just superb. It is the best version of the main Pandemic system. We'll comment on this a little bit later. But season 1 brought out a lot huge surprises, great envelopes, great content, and a good Pandemic game. The Return of Awakened Realms brought ISS Vanguard, one of their greatest games yet, implementations of systems that they had employed before. This one has a map book, it has a folder for your ship maintenance, which no one ever thought was going to work. It has a dice manipulation system, but overall, just great audio narration, great experience, and a solid theme. The Marvel franchise has done very well for itself lately in board games, and Marvel United is arguably the best Marvel game out there. It is very simple, it's very intuitive, but the variety is enormous. And if you love painting miniatures, oh man, are you in for a treat! You do not even have to be a big Marvel fan, which I actually am. So, yeah, this game is a definite winner, and it will keep on winning, I guess. Greenbrier Games does games in a very odd way and not always so successful. This one is a hidden gem. Grimslingers is Weird West to the max. It uses cards. There are a lot of things that I should not like about this game, but some reason I do, and I don't know why. I'm going to have to examine this further, but I can all tell you that the art is evocative and the gameplay is addictive. Updating Mice and Mystics to the post apocalyptic age is Aftermath, a storybook game from Plaid Hat again. This time it uses cards, poker cards, to establish random events. But again, the characters, the events, the locations, they all work together. Plaid Hat has been on this trajectory of perfecting its games until we get to some games that you'll see later on this list. But Aftermath is a solid entry. Controversial maybe, but season 2 for me of Pandemic Legacy is better than season 1. I like that they just went into a very different direction. This is no longer a typical pandemic game anymore. It kind of is a reverse version of it, which I just adore that much more. I like the theme, I like what it's trying to do. Is it broken a little bit? Yes, but as you will find out, I like broken games. So this one is definitely a winner. The sequel, in every which way to Above and Below, was near and far. It expanded upon the idea of narrative and what narrative could do in conjunction with characters. It expanded upon locations by introducing a map book, always a success in my book. And it had various modes that you can play solo, character modes, campaign modes, one offs. This game is astounding in what it tried to do and actually accomplished. I told you I would show you a better escape game than Exit, and Unlock is it. It may not destroy things, but it still does a lot more with the cards that it has. The themes are always fun. The solutions and the puzzles may not always hit the target, but what they do with so few mechanics and so much rich story is amazing. And I always have fun playing these games, always. The traditional concepts of fun and winning do not apply to Nemesis. You will get mauled. I love the Aliens franchise, and this is the pinnacle of an Aliens game. No matter what other typical Alien IPs are out there, Nemesis is it. Awaken Realms nailed it. I find the characters really interesting. I find the solo scenario booklets engaging. I find everything terrifying, which is good. The only thing terrifying about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice board game is the number of unpainted miniatures I still have. I did make some 3D houses that you can see in the lower right corner. Because essentially, what you're doing is you're playing a stealth game with these assassins that are jumping off of buildings and into plazas and taking out their enemies, fulfilling missions. An hidden envelope game or content game. This is would be a fun one to explore, but yeah, those miniatures. Back to Plaid Hat. This is arguably the highest rating Plaid Hat game on the list, Forgotten Waters, because of the pirate theme, because of what it tries to do with the actions that you can take as a characters. The audio narration is hilariously. You got to listen to this. And this is, where all the design choices of Plaid Hat have led to. Their games keep on getting better, and this one is no exception. A game that was definitely not that great was Hellboy, the board game. I love Hellboy, and I was heartbroken when the game first arrived, and the scenario packs were bland, and the tiles were not that great. So I set out to hobby this game into the perfect version that I want. You can check it out on the forums and BGG. Rest assured, this is now the game that I always wanted and now have. Great Hellboy experience now. Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is, to me, the best implementation of the Gloomhaven franchise. I think that the incorporation of the map book was brilliant. I think the shortening of the campaign was excellent. I love everything about this distilled version of Gloomhaven, which to me is the pinnacle of what Isaac could have done with the system. I wished he would have continued this trend, but no, there's Frosthaven, I guess. Continuing a little bit on the disappointing trend, at number 20, we find role player adventures. Now, why is this disappointing? Actually, nothing to do with the game. The game is brilliant. It's an RPG in a box through and through. All these booklets that are reminiscent of D&D adventures. There's a dice manipulation system that just works. The narrative is great. The characters are great. Everything is great about this. What was not so great is that I had to wait over a year to finally get my copy because they misjudged how many copies would get sold. Waste Nights, post apocalyptic Australian mayhem. This one has great story books that you get to dig into, scenarios that enrich in the environment. The characters are awesome Mad Max y kind of characters. You're riding around on vehicles trying to accomplish it. It's sometimes a little challenging, it's sometimes a little hard, but hey, it's the Australian outback, post apocalyptic times. 19 on my ranking. My father's work was a last minute addition to this list. I have yet to receive my copy, but I love the idea of this very gothic Frankenstein building thematic game with a booklet in the middle that changes the location each scenario that you play. A lot of narrative to this game, and people love to hobby with this game, which I love to do. Look at these jars with their potions in it. I want to do this, so I can't wait to get my copy and play this game for real. But yeah, it ranks high. Another game that ranks high is Solomon Kane. You can't get this game anymore either, but it's a wonderful hybrid of playing the same character, but you're playing different aspects of the character. So the characterization is great. There's tons of adventures all over the world that this guy does. It's a very bleak, dark game, darkly produced, but it's also very, very enchanting in a way. I want to play this right now. We're creeping ever so closely to the highest parts of the list. And you know what's also creeping? That mist of Tainted Grail. Tainted Grail is Awakened Realms' arguably best game, although there's one game that ranks even higher for me. Tainted Grail is Celtic lore, Arthurian lore, I should say, at its best. It's weird, it's haunting, it's mysterious. It has so much adventure, so many things to explore and dig into. And there's a new version coming out too. At 9.8, spot 15 is Aqua Chronicles. I love the IP. The French comic book about weird, horrific happenings in feudal Japan is awesome. The miniatures are the best among I've ever seen in this hobby, and there it's a dungeon crawl, but there's like a little tableau building going on. There's a solo mode. There's a tower defense mode coming out. This game has so much to offer. I love every little thing about it. What I also love is the really simple stuff like Cantaloupe on 14. This point and click adventure is reminiscent of, the adventures on Monkey Island, I think it was called back in the 80s. I love this. The humor is on par. The artwork is awesome. There's not a lot of it. The narrative is fun. The mystery solving is fun. This is just a weird one to put so high, but I love the whole implementation of it, the story aspects of it, the theme of it. Boss Battlers seem to have done really well in the last year. Vagrant Song is akin to Townsfolk Tussle in theme, but now you're on a train and you are essentially fighting these ghosts, these haints, and you're trying to bring them back to a sort of a peaceful existence as opposed to just killing them, which is a nice little spin. There's a little bindle bag that you're drawing tokens from, which is fun. There's little scenarios, there's little gags, there's little narrative events. Yeah, this is a really fun experience. The return of FFG's Descent was Legends of the Dark. Now, this is just a big toy factor plus app bonanza, so people may hate this, and a lot of them actually do. I don't. I actually think it's really charming. It's trying to do something different. The miniatures are the best that FFG has ever produced. The toy factor of these various dungeon tiles is interesting. I like what they're doing with the app. Yeah, I'm interested to see where this is heading with the next volume. FFG knocks it out of the park in the Lovecraftian arena with Arkham Horror, the card game. It is a card game, which typically does not rank really high on my list, but this is better than Eldritch Horror. This is better than Arkham Horror for the pure reason that it does what it does so well. These story cards, so rich in sort of like a choose your own adventure, fail forward kind of a fashion. The characters are all there. You can supplement it with Mansions of Madness miniatures if you wanted. The most broken game on my list is Skull Tales, but I love it so much. A number 10 and a 9.8. This pirate adventure, sailing across the sea, dungeon crawling, ship building bonanza just has everything that a hobby gamer desires to have. You can do so much with this. It's a toolkit of fun. I love everything and anything about Skull Tales, and I will keep this game till the moment I die. And if that's not my destiny, then Destinies may be my destiny, where you pick one of the three characters offered to you. And yes, you can play this game all in the app, but where was the fun in that? The tactile experience of manipulating these tiny little miniatures that I've painted, all of them, onto this tile laying landscape is just really fun. And scanning items to see what they do and try to achieve your final destiny is glorious, in my opinion. Well deserved on number 9. A number 8, we find the most original, I think, the granddaddy of tile exploration or card laying and exploring survival game, Seventh Continent. This is coming out soon with a sequel, Seventh Citadel. But for now, we are using famous literary characters to explore this island, solve puzzles, and remove ourselves from a curse. Hard to do, but fun to explore. Number 7 has Chronicles of Drunagor Age of Darkness. This is the most innovative implementation of a dungeon crawler I've seen so far. And yes, there's a lot of gimmicks. There's the 3D landscape, there's the doors that have a fog of war nature to it, so you don't know what's coming up behind it. There's the point and click imagery that you can choose your own adventure sort of in. The characters are fun, the art is great. Everything about this game is great. And if that dungeon crawler makes me jump up with joy, then this RPG in a box will. Folklore the Affliction may have many, 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 many fiddly little rules that people hate, but they're all just suggestions in the typical role playing fashion. If you want to role play and you're all by yourself, or you just want a board to actually manipulate pieces on, Folklore the Affliction, the sort of gothic horror implementation of a theme in that respect, is it. Then we have Sleeping Gods. If Ryan Lockett had a masterpiece, this would be it. And he's coming out with a sequel. How does this man do it? I don't know. But this game is evocative, a map book where you're just endlessly exploring. You're trying to find your way back home. It takes place in the 1920s, but you're in this weird world with weird creatures. The combat mechanics are innovative, and the resources that you have, they're gorgeous. Ah, okay, calm down, Marcel. Back to reality. Descent, Journeys in the Dark, higher than Legends in the Dark. This is the granddaddy of all dungeon crawlers. If you need to play a dungeon crawler, play this one. It is trope fantasy, sure. It has miniatures that are not great, sure. It has tons of cards and tons of tokens, sure. But there's so much adventure. This is a lifestyle game in its own right. You can explore Terranaught to your heart's desire. And if you want to dream of other places that are more exciting, go to Ether Fields. Awaken Realms venture into a dreamscape, a dream crawler, if you will. A number three. This is my favorite Awaken Realms game. The locations always change. They're always manipulating things. The rule book is vague and nebulous, like waking up out of a dream. I can talk endlessly about how this game is so super thematic, and I probably will in a future episode. But for now, it's number three. And a number two, surprisingly, Madara. Yes, there are some flaws with Madara. There's a lot of narrative, and if you don't like that kind of stuff, you're probably at the wrong channel. There's some visualizations in the theme that are a little bit controversial, but I did not think I would like this AI-driven, manga-themed dungeon crawler, but I do. It's so enchanting. It's put a spell on top of me. I can't describe it. What I can describe is my number one, and that is Mansions of Madness. Also, the granddaddy of Lovecraftian games, of Arkham Files games. And there is a lot to be said about this game, and I will in future episodes. But for now, all I can say is it has character, events, and locations that are perfectly integrated together. It does have an app, it has miniatures that are not great, the base is definitely not. But yeah, this is my number one of 1,500 games. And so that's it, a mix of the good, the biased, and the random. As we've gone through 1,500 games that I ran through Pub Meeple, there is a lot of room for ambiguity. But for now, this is the final of the draft videos. Story Tiles will move forward to three types of videos in the future. So, what can you expect? We are going to be looking at designs in our DM Masterclass series. We are going to be looking at the hobby in general, how you can paint and how you can enhance your board game experiences. That will be the hobby part. And then we will be judging games essentially on how well they actually were designed or what you can actually do with them on your game table. That will be the judging part. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this top list. Keep on exploring.
Dun, dun, dun.